Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. I'm your host, Jace. Today, we have a writer who's on the rise at Marvel Comics. Mr. Jed Mackay is here to talk about his work. Jed, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, like I said, your star has been on the rise. The overnight success story, like the one that takes 10 years, right? At least.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. That's my first Marvel work was in 2010. So
Yeah, and from then, sort of one of those situations, and I want to make this clear, everybody, because again, this isn't something that Jed just fell into. I've seen people talking, right place, right time. You have been wanting to be a comic creator for a really long time and honing your craft, working on your skills. And I say this all the time. It's not about getting the right opportunity and lucking into it. It's seizing that opportunity when it comes along and being ready because you've been preparing for so long. You were making your own comics long before you had a chance at Marvel.
yeah, I mean, not as much as a lot of other people have, but I was making comics with my friend Sheldon back in like 2005. Um, that said, I mean, I would be remiss in saying that there was not a great deal of right place and right time in my situation. In that, basically the entirety of my published work is through Marvel. I didn't have the kind of indie or self-publishing grind that a lot of people went through. So yeah, I mean, you're right in that there's luck and there's being ready to take advantage of an opportunity, but there is a lot of right place and right time in my situation.
Yeah, and again, to your credit, though, you've seized those opportunities, whether it's, okay, now we're going to do a Taskmaster book because he's in the Black Widow movie, or now we're going to do a Moon Knight book because he has a TV show available, turning in your stuff on time and turning in quality work.
Yeah, I mean, that's the trick. Like it's what I tell people when they say, oh, how do you break into comics? And that there's no set way this is going to happen. A lot of it is just kind of up to chance. It may happen or it may not. But the only thing you do have control over is, being ready to take advantage of that opportunity, if and when it comes up.
Yeah, so for those that aren't aware, Jed is Canadian, Prince Edward Island, if I'm not mistaken.
That's where I'm from. Yeah, I live in Nova Scotia currently, but my heart still beats that red soil.
The reason I bring that up is because I've heard you mention Alpha Flight as one of your favorite teams, a property you'd want to work on. And in fact, if anybody's watching us on YouTube, you'll see the anthology that you did with a couple of fellow Canadian Marvel writers, Ed Brisson and Jim Zub, who have both been on the show before. Is it just the inherent Canadianness of Alpha Flight that has them so high up on your list of things you'd like to work on?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, they're the only Canadian superhero team in the Marvel universe, and there's just something very endearing about them because I love Alpha Flight, but they're also kind of losers, and there's something very charming about that combination. In one respect, because it's kind of funny. There's in the early days, Guardian is always just like, man, I'm poor all the time. This sucks. The exchange rate between the Canadian and the US dollar is really screwing me over. I'm like, yeah, preach, dude. Actually, it does me quite well since I get paid by an American company. But also, there's a certain kind of relatable pathos, especially when you're talking about Guardian, where he's a guy who's not very good at being a superhero. And he probably shouldn't be a superhero because he keeps dying. And one of the times he died is because his wife came in the room at the wrong time and his suit exploded and it killed him. But all that said, he doesn't give up and he keeps going at it. And that's what I really love about Guardian. And to an extent, you kind of see that through a lot of the Alpha Flight characters because they're all really kind of screwed up in their own ways. And it's something that I think gets glossed over a lot, where it's just kind of the general idea is like, oh, they're the Canadian superhero team. But also they're a group of people who are really screwed up. And I find it really charming the way that, they stick to it. They keep going, despite all of them dying several times over, despite, an apathetic American comic buying public who doesn't want to keep the book going. But yeah, it's just very charming. I find it as like a superhero team, I feel like they got more akin to like Doom Patrol than like anything else.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. And here we are saying, yeah, they struggle to find sales or find an audience, but
Mm.
that original series launched by John Byrne went 100 and almost 160 issues, I think.
Yeah, it was like 155, 157, something like that. Yeah, oh, I know. But also that was in a time period when, you know, almost any book could go for a fairly significant run.
That's true. That's
I
true.
mean,
Yeah,
wasn't it like a Ronald Reagan comic book at one point?
it's got 40 issues out of Ronald Reagan. Well, the other thing is that's so different now too is
Yeah.
back then the publishers sort of wanted a stable creative team to stay on a book for a really long time, and now it's kind of like, man, you get up above uh, 20 issues and they start thinking, well, we need to bring on somebody new, which I find so strange. I mean, if the book is selling well, why would you want to switch it up?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of decisions get made that's far beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, fair enough. You did get quite a run out of another character that most people wouldn't necessarily consider A-list, and that's Black Cat, but it was
Yeah.
split up into two, which I found kind of interesting. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but it did seem to be one whole cohesive story from start to finish, even though you had a little bit of kind of a break in the middle. Did you sort of have the ending in mind where you wanted Felicia to be, that kind of last arc with her mom? Did you have that in mind right when you started the series or early on when you were planning it out?
No. So basically, when we started Black Cat, um, it was the first ongoing I'd done. So it was the first book I had where there wasn't a set endpoint that I was preparing for and trying to figure it out, which presents its own challenges, especially for the first time you're doing it. But when I started, I asked Nick, the editor, I was like, listen, what should I plan for? Because, you got to get your outlines and set out your arcs, try to figure things out. He said, well, hopefully we'll get 10. If we get shut down at 5, like a lot of series do, then, be prepared to handle that. But, we'll keep our fingers crossed. If we're lucky, we'll get to 10 issues. So that was the plan. I had everything set up. It was going to wind up in by issue 10, which at that point was just that whole, Black Fox Thieves Guild story. But it did better than people expected, and it kind of that sort of end point kept getting extended further and further. So what was originally going to be 10 issues, we expanded out to 17 issues, I think. However, we got the chop during COVID because I mean the kind of the world ground to a halt. The comic book industry was no different, and Black Cat was one of those series that wasn't deemed as commercially viable or perhaps certainly like flagship important as a lot of other books. So it got put on a hiatus. And so there's a period of time when we had no Black Cat books coming out. I was assured that we would get it back going at some point. Excuse me, but there was no sort of set idea on that because we shut down at issue 12. I had already written issues 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, I think I had about 4 issues in the can. So that would have taken us right to the end of the that Black Fox story.
So those weren't when you had written them at that time. They weren't necessarily the King and Black tie-ins that we saw when it relaunched.
No, because the King of Black tie-ins didn't exist at that point. So
Gotcha.
when we relaunched, said, okay, we're coming off hiatus. We're getting back in production. There's a few tricks we got to do first. First off, we're doing with new number 1. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Yeah, makes sense. That's right. about what you'd expect. And also, we're starting off with a 3-part King of Black tie-in because King of Black was going on at the time. Felicia's also an ancillary Spider-Man character. It just kind of ties in. So I was like, okay, cool. So I'll do the three-part King of Black, and then we get back to what we were doing before, because that Queen Cat issue was supposed to be issue 13. And it became issue 4 of the new series. The new series. It's the same series, except some different numbers and a little bit of messing about. So yeah, we did that, ran out that series, and then Nick was like, okay, well, we're still extended. We can do another arc. And we kind of put our heads together and like, well, let's go big. We'll do like an Infinity Stones thing. And I was aware that, having this next arc approved didn't necessarily mean there was going to be another arc approved, because again, we're talking about a Black Cat series here. It's not Iron Man, it's not X-Men. So when I started working on that series, once I figured out what it was going to look like, that ending was one of the first things I came up with, because I was like, this, it's a very real possibility this book could end here. And I think this would be a really great ending. And as it turned out, it did. And because I was like, if we get another arc after this, then we'll deal with the repercussions of this ending, moving into another arc. But as it turned out, it just ended up as being a pretty good sort of capstone for the series.
And I think a lot of people, I mean, obviously Moon Knight is huge right now. He's definitely having a moment. You're the writer on that series, and we'll definitely get into it. But for me, you're always going to be synonymous with Black Cat now, because you did such a phenomenal job with her. And I feel like this is really a character defining run. You really went back to her roots, who she was at the beginning when she showed up in Amazing Spider-Man 194, created by Marv Wolfman and Keith Pollard. She's gone through different iterations. I mean, most recently, she almost inexplicably, for anybody who was a fan of her in the 80s, with this Queen Pin thing and really leaning in to try to take over all the crime families, which never really gelled with her personality. You really brought her back to the core of the character, I feel like, but you also made it, kind of fun and adventure. I mean, do you really feel like, or do you mind that people might associate Black Cat in your run with, those two things will be synonymous, yourself and the character?
Oh, I mean, I think that would be great. Anytime you take on a new character, every time a writer takes on, or anybody really takes on a new book with a character they've not worked on before, and especially if it's someone who, hasn't had an ongoing series before, you always hope, you're like, this is going to be the defining arc for this defining run for this character, So the fact that people are responding to it well makes me really happy. And it accomplished what we wanted it to accomplish, was to create new fans for this character. Because, there's a lot of people who, as the series went on, picked it up and said, I never thought I'd like a Black Cat book, or I never thought I'd be excited for a Black Cat book. And for me, that's kind of the greatest mark of success you can get, is people who would have zero interest in this character are interested in them. Going from being completely disinterested to becoming a believer, I think is it's a real accomplishment. It's a real vote of confidence. So I'm very happy with the work that I did with my various collaborators, the artists who did all the actual hard work and the heavy lifting. And I'm hopeful that it will stand the test of time.
Yeah, I think it will, because again, you grounded her, you made her fun. She clearly was the Felicia Hardy that we first met, with the wanting the approval of her father, wanting the approval of her mother. And yeah, you really played with that and showed that. To me, that's where I relate to Felicia. I'm not a cat burglar, I'm not a sexy woman, but my in for her is how much she cares about, her father who's passed, and obviously her mother with what happens in the last arc. And even the way that she feels about her crew, she's always that's her immediate family, sort of. And so I think you guys really nailed that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That was one of the things I really enjoyed working on Black Cat is, I didn't create any of these characters. Lydia Hardy, Boris Corpse, Bruno Granger, they all existed before. But, bringing them back out of retirement, well, not retirement, but, bringing them back up again and, brushing the dust off and seeing how they interact with this character in a modern setting was a lot of fun. And, trying to kind of define what her social life is, what her support network is. I really enjoyed that first issue where she was hanging out with her mom. I think it was issue 7 or so. She's hanging with her mom at that flea market under the bridge in New York, and it was a lot of fun because her mom just does not take any of her shit.
Yep.
So yeah, it was a real treat.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that, because my mom's the same way with me. She doesn't take any of my crap at all.
Yeah.
You mentioned wanting to go big, if this was going to be the last arc, it turned out it was. You really can't go much bigger in the Marvel Universe than the Infinity Stones. And when we start talking about who Felicia is, much more of a grounded character. In fact, in that in the first issue when you guys returned, and it's that fight against Null with Captain America and everything, she even kind of says, this is not what I
Yeah.
do, you know, out
This is
here.
not my thing.
Yeah, this is not my thing, fighting a battle to try to prevent the world from ending. So to have the Infinity Stones, I thought was fantastic. And then that sort of tied in. You got to sort of do this event that crossed through a lot of the
Mm.
Marvel annuals, where you did the backup story with Nighthawk and whatnot. So were those annuals already planned out? Like how did that tie in sort of end up working out?
It's So I had been putting ideas together for the Infinity Score, the Black Cat story,
Mm-hmm.
and then I went down to New York just before COVID hit in February of 2020. So I had some meetings at the Marvel offices where I talked to folks, and they're like, "Well, we're doing this thing called Infinite Destinies, and we think it'd be a great way to kind of run up to this Black Cat arc." I'm like, "Sure, yeah, sounds good. Sounds good to me." Because like they're like, we've had these Infinity Stone characters floating around and want to do something with them. And, we might as well have you do it since you're going to be having them appear in your Black Cat series. So I was like, great. Yeah, sure. So I kind of, was figuring out the general idea of how it's going to work. Um, I mean, they were pretty disparate and disconnected as far as like the individual stories went.
Mm-hmm.
But then we had the Fury and Nighthawk thing running through the back of it, which I really enjoyed it. I think that was a story that I think came out really well, and Juan Ferreira's work on it was just amazing. So, and, I really like Nick Fury. I think he's a character that a lot of people kind of dismiss, but for me, I'm just like he just works.
Yeah, and then bringing this newer version of Nighthawk in that Jason
Yeah,
Aaron created for his Heroes Reborn. Yeah, that dynamic, especially they're both African American guys, and yeah, I mean, Juan is amazing. I've had the opportunity to meet him a few times. Yeah, it just worked. I thought it
I
was a
feel
lot of
like
fun.
I feel like you almost never see anyone who can do the because he does this like double page spreads where he goes in this direction, then switches direction and switches
Right.
again. Like you almost never see anyone be able to do that. And he's just like, yeah, watch me.
Yeah, well, and the fact that a lot of times he colors his own work too, so
Yeah,
you get that pure what's in his head, comes out on the page so well. So,
yeah.
and you're not completely done with Black Cat either, right? We do have an Iron Man Black Cat for a crossover we saw back in the first run, issue 11, I think it was,
Yeah,
where we saw
issues 11 and 12.
the Iron Cat armor, right? Is that how
Iron
it's
Cat, yeah.
referred to? So, is that going to be an ongoing? What's the story on the Iron Cat?
Iron Cat's a mini. So it's going to be 5 issues starting in June. Yes, June, I believe. So yeah, I'm very excited for it. That was originally going to be the next arc of Black Cat after Infinity Score.
Gotcha.
So, had we kept going, this Iron Cat, arc would have been the next one. So it's nice to get a kind of second chance to do something that originally I thought was kind of dead in the water. It's a little different from what it was originally going to be because just, the demands of the story of being a Black Cat story following the previous stories to being a Black Cat Iron Man team up that has more stand on its own. But no, I'm pretty psyched for it. I've been getting such great pages back from Pear, and he's such talent. It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, I was sad to see Spider-Woman end because it was one of my favorite series, but it freed him up for this. So I'm excited to get your take, not only on Iron Cat, but which we've seen a little bit before, like I mentioned, but you're getting to take on Tony Stark again. You see a character; he's so complicated, right? There's so many layers to Tony Stark. Is he somebody you like writing? Where's your in to write Stark?
I really like Tony Stark. He's a character that you can go in a lot of different ways where a lot of times you have characters who are like, oh, they're the wild card, or like, oh, they're the serious one. But depending on who Iron Man is with, he can kind of go either way. And I think that's really fun because he's a guy who thinks that he is kind of like a wild and crazy guy. But when he's presented with someone who's more irritating than he is, he just kind of like gets really frustrated and upset. So I'll leave you to guess how that's going to shake out with Black Cat.
Yeah, he's usually not playing the straight man, but I have a
Yeah.
feeling with Felicia in the room, he'll be relegated to that role.
Oh yeah. I mean, like he's not gonna out wild card Felicia, that's for sure. And also, they're not exactly on the best terms given she really pulled one over on him back in Black Cat number 12. So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, another character you took on briefly that's also very layered, very nuanced, you sort of bridge the gap between the end of Charles Soule's Daredevil and when Chip Zdarsky came on the book. And Charles really, man, he made it super challenging for everyone who's going to follow him, right? Like, and he talked about it. It's this tradition of the Daredevil writer will leave the, upcoming writer in a really tough spot. Mark Waid left Daredevil behind bars when Soule took over. Charles killed Matt Murdock. He's dead. And then you got to come in and kind of set things up for Chip Zdarsky. So talk a little bit about the challenge of that and working on that Man Without Fear mini.
Yeah. So, Charles put Matt in a very difficult position, and we already knew what Chip was going to be doing, and they thought, well, let's do a thing to kind of bridge the gap here. So Devin emailed me just after Daughters of the Dragon. This is like my second series, I think. No, Ghost Panther was my second series, but this is like my second real full-length miniseries. And he's like, yeah, we're gonna bridge the gap here. Daredevil's gonna get hit by a truck. He's gonna be in a hospital. He's gonna be dead. This book's gonna be called, Man Without Fear: The Death of Daredevil. I'm like, okay, cool. It's like, he's gonna be in the hospital at the beginning in a coma. At the end, he's got to be ready to get out of the hospital. I'm like, so wait, he's in the hospital for 5 issues? They're like, yes. I'm like, okay, that presents some interesting challenges.
Right? Yeah.
Sound like 100 pages of Daredevil in the hospital. But it was a really interesting challenge, and it was very, very intimidating to work on a character with the sort of clout that Daredevil has, given that previously I worked on Daughters of the Dragon and Ghost Panther, and then they're like, oh, here, do a Daredevil. I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, it was very exciting. And it also was a weekly book too, so I was teaching junior high full time, and then I would have to write a Daredevil script every weekend, and it was a very, very tight schedule.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, because that was a thing about it. It was paced interestingly, because even as a reader, having it come out weekly, it felt like it was going really fast because you had an issue every week. But at the same time, there wasn't necessarily a lot of forward momentum, because for anybody who hasn't read it, it's really about Matt making the decision to still be Daredevil, considering all of the pain that he has gone through. And you really sort of boiled who Daredevil and Matt are down to that. And you explore even the different aspects. He's got his Matt Murdock personality, not unlike Moon Knight in a lot of ways. He's got his he's got his Man Without Fear. He's got his Devil personality. He's got his Murdock personality, and they're all sort of, different and have different aspects to them. So, it must have presented a great challenge to you to figure out, how am I going to pace this thing correctly to give 5 issues and still keep it engaging.
Yeah, and it's just like, going from a coma to being, well, again, as we've seen, not really that ready to be Daredevil again.
Right.
But, he's going to give it the old college try. It's interesting. I'm like, okay, laying it out. I'm like, okay, this issue, he's going to be awake, but he's going to be in the bed. This issue, he's going to be awake, but in a wheelchair. This issue, he's going to be, sort of walking, etc. And then at the same time, figuring out, the flashbacks that's going to illustrate the point that we're trying to make in the present and that kind of thing. It was tough. There was a pretty steep learning curve for me, given that, it was a big book that was coming out very quickly. So I had to learn very quickly, but, I was very happy with it. And, I got to do, every issue had the kind of the same themed first page with the credits, because I was like, I want to do like To Live and Die in LA credits, but in a comic book. I'm like, not really sure how it's going to work, but we'll give it a try. We'll see how it goes. And I got to work with such great artists on it. So
yeah, it's definitely a series I recommend if anybody's kind of curious about where Daredevil is. Because I know a lot of people jumped on with the Zdarsky run. It's like, okay, why is he this way, like a little weakened? Like, go and read Jed's mini, and you'll really understand that like he said, he not really ready, but gonna give it the college try. From that to Black Cat, and then obviously, as we mentioned, Moon Knight, really kind of staying in this sort of street level character. But then we've got Doctor Strange to talk about too. But let's talk about Moon Knight first, because as I said, he's having a moment. And what I love about your run And I think, and this was a surprise to me, I heard you say that it was sort of an editorial mandate to say, hey, we're not going to focus on the DID stuff, which that wasn't a big focus when Moon Knight first came on the scene. And a lot of writers, I don't know, maybe it's their or what they find most interesting about them. It's sort of what I find least interesting about him. And so I like that your run is more, focused away from that. Is it just the editorial mandate that makes you go that direction, or is that not something that you see as key to the character and you more want to focus on his, relationship with his community and his, this idea of wanting to do good, basically?
Well, I think that the idea is an important part of Moon Knight, especially as it's been established so far, because it speaks to issues of mental health, and especially issues of mental health that are important to a lot of readers, where you see
Fair,
a lot of, it being very relatable, or, being an exemplar of someone who's out there with, various mental health disorders. That said, I think not getting right into it from the get-go was the smart move as far as an editorial decision, because we're looking to, reroute Moon Knight in a whole new kind of status quo. And well, I mean, as whole new as it can be when he's still beating up people on the streets.
Right.
But we're trying to set up something new, and getting into DID from the beginning, and in the same way with the other editorial mandate of like, we're not going to get too into Khonshu stuff either. Both of those things just are like kind of like big black holes that just draw everything into it, because they're both very big story issues for Moon Knight. They're very big things that just have a real pull, a real gravity. So putting those, not, and again, they're not disappeared entirely. They're not brushed under the rug. These are things that we're going to address as time goes on. But taking those first, 12 issues or so to look and explore what this new status quo for Moon Knight looks like, what it looks like when he's, divorced himself from the god that he serves, where he's out on the streets again, where he's building a new supporting cast. I think it's important to focus on that, to show people, say, okay, here's Moon Knight, you've seen him before, here's how it's different, and take a look, see if you like it.
Yeah, and I think it works really well. I mean, I always took because even when he was first around, it wasn't even called dissociative identity disorder. It was called multiple personality disorder, and I always just took it as, okay, the moon has different phases, and so does Mark Spector.
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying in terms of, yeah, we can't really, in your country or mine, we can't really talk enough about mental health and get enough help for the people that need it. So I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, it does have to be entertaining. And like you said, when you focus on the DID or the Khonshu stuff, yeah, it can drag the story down in terms of things you can do with action and pacing and that sort of thing if it's all real heavy stuff all the time.
Well, and the thing is too, like, with Moon Knight, we've already kind of set the gold standard for telling a DID story straight off the bat, which was, the Jeff Lemire and Greg Smallwood run. Like, and I'm not going to tell that same story better than Jeff Lemire did. Like, I'm not going to match that. So rather than try to do something that has already been done better than I could do it, I'd rather focus on something that I can do well and then work up to something else along those ideas.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So, and it's been well received, as we know. A lot of people paying attention to Moon Knight because of the TV show. I personally don't watch a lot of the comic movies and TV stuff just because I don't have time, because I'm too busy reading comics. But have you been watching it? Have you been enjoying it?
Yeah, I've been watching the show. It's it's fun. It's I'm enjoying that they took a lot of different swings in the way they're telling a Moon Knight story. So it's pretty far afield from what you would expect a Moon Knight story to be just from reading comic books, because, we've all read these comics, and then we build our expectations based on what we know. And they're throwing things at us that are, wildly different from what we expect. And I enjoy that because, I don't need it to be the same as comic books. The comic book's already there. But if you show me something where I'm guessing, where I'm not really sure what to expect from the next episode to the next episode, then, it's got me interested.
Yeah, fair enough. Have you had any people who have reached out to you on social media saying, hey, I picked up your book because I saw the show?
Yeah, some people, there's like you said, it's having a minute, right? So it's not, I don't know if there's a ton of people getting at me, or at least maybe I'm just not seeing it. I had to set my my notifications to a much softer kind
Right.
of level as I gain more followers. I'm just like, oh man, I can't handle this. My phone battery's just dying. Um, but I'll see people asking other people on Twitter for recommendations, saying, "Oh, I just got into this because of all the hype for the TV show. What do you recommend?" And it's nice when I get tagged in when people say, "Oh, read the current run that Jed Mackay and Alexander Capuccio and Rochelle Rosenberg are doing." I'm like, yeah, read that.
Yeah.
Go
Well,
on, go
I
on.
mean, honestly, he's at, as we've said, different phases of the moon, the Lemire run, go back to the Doug Munch stuff. The David Finch illustrated one. I think it was it
Charlie
Mac?
Hudson.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's had so many different
Mm-hmm.
titles. Like
Oh
going
yeah,
back to what we are saying, like you got to do the first Black Cat. Moon Knight has had so many different series, some longer than others, and yeah, it always seems to struggle to find footing in the end. And a lot of them have very much of a different flavor, and they're not as new reader accessible is how I'll put it,
sure.
as your run is. I think your run, and it probably goes back to what you're talking about of not leaning into the DID stuff, not leaning into the Khonshu stuff. Your run is real easy. Pick up first issue and hit the ground running with what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and that was it's by design where we knew that with a TV show coming out, there were going to be people picking this up, and it was going to be their first Moon Knight comic. So striking that balance between doing something that is interesting to these long-term Moon Knight fans, because you know, as you said, Moon Knight, there's long periods of time between Moon Knight series. So when a new one comes up, people are hyped because they're like, "Oh, this is our favorite character. We haven't seen a new book from him in like 5 years or however long." And I'm trying to think of the timeline here. Yeah, anyways. So we want to have something that is exciting and interesting for long-term Moon Knight fans who know the character's history inside out, and his friends and his villains and what have you, but also setting it up in a way that a new reader can pick it up and know everything they need to know, which I think in part is kind of one of the reasons that we've made a break with some of his history and started relatively fresh. And, in that respect, spinning out of the Age of Khonshu from Avengers was great for that, because it put Mark in a position where A, he's super low, and B, everybody hates him. So he's got to make new friends.
Yeah, it's a good point. And the other thing that you guys pulled in was from the Warren Ellis run. The idea of the white suit, which is fantastic. Now, the Ellis run had a little bit of more of a horror vibe. You guys are sort of playing with that a little bit too. You're bringing in some aspects of horror, some spookiness.
Yep.
It's not something I've seen in your work before. Is that something you're enjoying doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing I like about Moon Knight is I think he works best when he's on the streets. But I think Moon Knight on the streets is very different than Daredevil on the streets, where Moon Knight deals with street level crime, but it's weird street level crime. And I think for me, that's where in my opinion, I think that's where the character works best, is where I'm most interested in him. And that's kind of what we've been ramping up. And, we've got our sort of regular crime stuff. We've got our maniacal villain who's looking to get up on Moon Knight's grill, as we've seen lately. But there is definitely kind of like a darker bent or a horrific bent or a supernatural bent. And I think that's kind of a niche that Moon Knight can claim in the sort of street level ecology of Marvel Comics.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it sort of dovetails into the next thing I want to talk about, which is you got to kill Doctor Strange, and then the title passed on to his wife Clea in the Strange title that you relaunched. But man, that I have never been a Doctor Strange fan, but reading your Death of Doctor Strange it made me a Doctor Strange fan. Like the fact that you got to kill the modern one and then brought in the Silver Age one to sort of solve his own murder. But it was so much more than just a murder mystery. And you really got to show how important Doctor Strange is in the overall Marvel universe, especially with a lot of the one shots and tie-ins. So talk a little bit about coming up with the ideas, the breadth, the scope of that, and how you feel that it turned out now that it's in your rear view.
Yeah, so like Death of Doctor Strange came about from the King of Black Cat bit, because Doctor Strange was in it. I finished up working on Taskmaster, and I needed another project. So I was like, well, there's no Doctor Strange book, and there's no Doctor Strange book announced. So I emailed Darren Shan, who's the Doctor Strange editor. I'm like, hey, can I write Doctor Strange? He's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, all right, shit. I was like, here's some ideas. He's like, no, actually, we're going to kill him and you can do it. I was like, oh, okay.
Did he tell you why they wanted to kill him?
That'd just be a bit of a laugh.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe
I
so they
mean,
can bring him back right when the movie comes out and have that.
yeah, I mean, like, Doctor Strange, I don't think has ever been a big seller in the
Right.
modern period.
That's true.
So I think it's just kind of like, well, let's try this. Let's do something with his character because his last series got canceled. So let's see what happens. And because it's like comic books. When in doubt, let's kill someone and see how it shakes out.
Yeah.
So that was basically it. It's like, yeah, we're gonna kill Doctor Strange. Brevoort's got this idea that when he dies, his younger self can come out and investigate the mystery. I'm like, that's very elegant, and I really like it. So I will take that, and we took it from there.
And then did you know right away that you were going to have the follow-up series and you were going to make Clea the sorcerer?
No, actually, we while we were planning it, even while we were writing it, we weren't exactly sure how we wanted to end it. So we had 2 or 3 different contingencies in place, basically, while we were trying to figure things out as things went along. So we're like, oh, I don't know. What do we want to bring Stephen back, or do we want to bring Stephen back but he's not the Sorcerer Supreme, or do we want to make Wong the Sorcerer Supreme, or do we want to make Clea the Sorcerer Supreme, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of like bouncing ideas back and forth. And got to a certain point, we're like, okay, Darren's like, listen, we're going to do a follow-up series, and you can write it. I'm like, great. And so we started talking about what we thought it would look like would be the best way to do it. I'm like, well, let's eventually settle on Clea, because Clea was kind of like the breakout character of Death of Doctor Strange, or at least I felt. She got the best emotional beats. And I think she's a character who has not gotten a lot of shine in the last, I don't know, however many years, despite being an integral part of Doctor Strange history since Strange Tales 120 something, So it was a lot of fun to look at what a book that has Strange in the title, but featuring Clea, like what would that look like? How is she going to approach the job differently? What sort of methods is she going to use? And, looking at the differences between that character, she grew up in the Dark Dimension. She's not human. Her mom is a warlord. Her uncle is the Dread Dormammu. So necessarily she's going to have a different approach to the job. She was never a doctor. She was warlord born. So it's been a lot of fun kind of exploring that different approach and seeing how everybody else is dealing with this.
Yeah, it's fair to say that Clea has an edge to her. She doesn't really take anybody's shit.
Not really, no. And she's at a tough point in her life where, as we saw in Death of Doctor Strange, at the end of the Wade run there, she and Stephen were in a good spot, and they're gonna figure things out. And then Mephisto took those memories, as he does, that little scamp. And then once Strange was dead, the memories came back, and then so she's in a spot where she's been thwarted, and she does not care to be thwarted. And now she's going to try to thwart back.
Now, do you find it? We're talking about Clea and what a strong female character you've made, and how we've seen her not really taking anybody's crap so far in the series. Not dissimilar from Felicia in that way. Where a really strong female character. I've heard you say in interviews that you don't necessarily look at the character as male, female, whatever. You just want to write a relatable, strong character. But is it more challenging to find a female voice, or do you not even think in those terms?
I mean, not really. It does sound a bit milquetoast to be like, oh, I don't see male or female. They're just a character,
right?
It's the same kind of shit. People are like, I don't see race. But ultimately, my main concern is just to create, or not create, but depict a character that is interesting and fun to read about. So, characters who, they have their strengths and things they're good at, but also they're always defined by what they want. You see that a lot. That's a running theme in Black Cat is, everybody wants something, and if you can get those people what they want, then you can get your way. And in Strange, what Clea wants is very clear. She wants what's hers because she's of the Fall Team. She's a warlord, heir to a warlord, and warlords get what they want. They don't let people take things that are theirs.
Yeah,
So,
it's an
and
excellent. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying, it's not necessarily a laudable thing, but also, these characters don't need to be perfect, and shouldn't be. These characters have their flaws, their obsessions, the things that they want to the detriment of all other things.
So when you're approaching a character, and yeah, like you said, certainly when it comes to Felicia, she's a thief, and when she sees something she wants, she takes it. That's sort of her motivation. Is that always your approach when you go to start looking at this new character? Okay, my in, how I'm going to find my hook is I'm going to look at what they want, what are their motivations, what are they trying to get? Do you always approach it from that initial perspective?
I mean, essentially, because that's what I find the most relatable thing about something, because everybody wants something. We all want things, and a great deal of our life is based around how we fulfill those. And, it's not necessarily wanting like, oh, I want a car, but like, I want to look after my family, or I want to help people, or I want to create things. And these are the things that drive all of us. So looking at what a character wants and what they're willing to do to get it, I think, is one of the most useful kind of methods for me to get in the head of a character and like figure out how this is going to go. And the other thing is like, how can I make them do cool things and say stuff that sounds awesome?
Yeah, going back to what we said at the beginning, right? It's got to be entertaining at the end.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, no one's looking for me to write an entirely prose issue about someone's internal conflict. They still got to blow things up and like drive cars off ramps.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like I said, you've made me a Doctor Strange fan, and I've been loving what you're doing with Clea so far. I also want to touch on Spider-Man. Were you part of the Beyond board? Talking about doing these weekly books. It was almost like a TV writers' room style. Were you part of that?
No. If I was anything on the Beyond board, it'd be like the intern, or like the guy who delivers the mail. I just would step in and fill in for stuff when it just needed to be done. So Nick would email me like, I need 15 pages of Colleen Wing and Misty Knight. I'm like, sure.
Yeah, I got that in my tool bag.
You'll have it in 2 days, no problem. Or like, I need like 3 pages of Morbius, or like 6 pages of Ben Reilly fighting through security. I'm like, yeah, all right, sure, why not? No problem.
Yeah, is he somebody? I mean, I have to imagine. I know you grew up, reading your dad's comics, a lot of Marvel stuff. So I have to imagine you have a bucket list of characters that you would want to work on. And anybody who's at Marvel probably has a Spider-Man story or two in their back pocket. So I imagine you do as well.
I mean, I have some Spider-Man thoughts, certainly. I wouldn't say I've got an arc or something ready to roll, but he's a fun character. I like working with Spider-Man a lot. I mean, obviously, I kind of made my name such as it is off the Spider Office, Black Cat being a Spider-Man character. So yeah, it's a great corner of the Marvel universe.
Yeah, and to your credit, you've taken some of these characters that aren't as well known. I mean, Moon Knight obviously stars on the rise, but we talked about Doctor Strange not exactly being traditionally a bestseller. Black Cat never had a regular series before you took her on. Another mini that you did, and he's one of my all-time favorite characters. And in fact, I have a Mark Brooks commission when Mark Brooks did those Tron inspired. Yes. So I have a Taskmaster that is in the Tron style that Mark Brooks did for me. And you did the Taskmaster mini, and Taskmaster is 100% the protagonist, but you didn't try to go a different way and turn him into a hero or make him a good guy. You just leaned into who he was. That had to be a blast to do.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I really like Taskmaster. I keep like shoehorning him into things just because I think he's a delight. But so Chris Robinson emailed me. I'm like, I got something for you if you got the time. I'm like, well, what is it? It's like, it's Taskmaster series. I'm like, yeah, I got the time. And yeah, it was really exciting. It was a lot of fun because I like characters a bit sassy. I like characters a bit silly. And Taskmaster is very much both of those. Well, at the same time being, like a stone cold badass. But at the same time, he's kind of like a shitty coward. And there's all these kind of contradictions. He's being pulled in different directions all the time by his various, worst impulses and worst self that it makes him a lot of fun to work on.
Yeah, and you got to bring in another, obviously, like I mentioned right at the start, everybody, this idea of Taskmaster having his own book because he was in the Black Widow
Yeah.
movie, so Black Widow had to be in it. But you also got to bring in Nick Fury, who you know talked about earlier is such a great
Mhm.
character as well.
Yeah, because I had Taskmaster and Fury meet up in Daughters of Dragon, the series I wrote. And I basically, as I was writing, I'm like, having a sensible chuckle to myself as I'm writing these interactions of Taskmaster and Fury, just like being extremely passive aggressive to one another
Mm-hmm.
and like just being real catty bitches. Um, because, Taskmaster was the first costumed villain Fury ever met. And I think that's really funny that they're still associating now, like all these, well, all our years later, because that was before Fury was Fury. Like he was just he was a ranger and went back home because his mom had died. And he
Yeah,
goes to her house and like
yeah,
Taskmaster's there.
yeah.
He's
Marcus
like,
Johnson, right? He
yeah.
wasn't even going by Nick Fury then.
Oh yeah, because I mean he had two eyes and he had hair. And so they have this like long history that I think it's just really funny because they do not like each other, but they cannot get away from each other because they just run in the same circles and like work the same business. So I was like, yeah, I got it. This has got to be like a Fury Taskmaster buddy kind of situation.
Yeah, it was a fantastic series. I highly recommend it for anybody. If you're not a Taskmaster fan, you will be by the end of it. And I would love for you to come back to the character at some point. I think I've heard you
Oh
say
yeah,
you have some more Taskmaster stories as well.
yeah. I've got at least like two more Taskmaster series in my pocket just because he's such a fun character to work with, and he's he's great. Like he looks awesome. He's got that awesome costume with like the pirate boots and like the underpants over his pants and the skull mask. And then like Alessandro did such a good job drawing it. Like I don't think I've ever seen such a good Taskmaster. And like his skull mask was so like expressive, improbably so, but it looked so good and it worked so well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic series, and not only was the interior art, there wasn't a bad cover, like regular or variant. There wasn't
Oh
a
yeah.
bad cover
Yeah,
for
they're
that whole
great.
series. They were awesome. Well, if anybody's watching us on YouTube, you'll notice in the bottom corner there, of course, I picked the Jace Bellerin cover. I used to play Magic the Gathering. You write
Oh,
Magic the
nice.
Gathering for Boom Studios. I haven't played it in years, but I'm curious, how familiar were you with the property? Did you ever used to play it, or was it for you just hey, I'm going to learn about this world and write some fantasy stories?
Oh yeah, like I was big into Magic in the '90s when I was in high school. I've got just over there. I found at my parents' house. I thought I'd thrown away a stack this big of Inquest magazines, which
Nice.
was such. I was so pleased when I realized I hadn't thrown those out, and I took them home, and just like absolutely elated. But yeah, I've still got like my old box of cards here somewhere. Um, so yeah, like I had a lot of familiarity with the Magic up till about the year 2000.
Gotcha.
So when I got the job, I had nothing else going on. COVID shut down all my Marvel books, and boom, got at me and like, hey, do you want to do a Magic book? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. A, I have a lot of affection for the property, and B, I have literally nothing else going on right now, so I will absolutely work on this. Um, so I had to catch up on the continuity, the story of the game. I was like, kids, how much can have changed in 20 years? Turns out a lot. Luckily, I had a friend of mine from high school who we used to play together all the time. Hadn't really ever left, so he was very up on the lore. So he was able to give me a lot of coaching as I was trying to put together my first pitch because so much had changed. And I was looking at these wikis and like, none of this makes sense to me. This is like there's just such a volume of information because by the time I stopped playing and paying attention to the game to the present, they really doubled down on story and characters and stuff like that. So it was a real catch up, but it was a lot of fun to work with this property that I grew up playing and like being really really into.
Yeah, that was going to be my question because I quit right around the time the Planeswalkers first showed up in the card game, and they were heading in that story direction, but
Mm-hmm.
it didn't seem like there was a lot. It almost seemed like if you're coming into it as a writer, as opposed to coming in to write, a Marvel character where you got to worry about decades of continuity, this might be a little easier. It sounds like that actually wasn't the case with Magic.
Well, no, because like even a Marvel character that I'm not familiar with, I'm familiar with everything around them.
Gotcha.
Whereas there had been a complete, cosmic shift in what a planeswalker was since the last time. I mean, like I said, I stopped paying attention to it around 2000. So this has been like invasion set.
Right.
So at that point in time, planeswalkers were like characters of, godlike importance and power. And since then, they've been depowered to be, much more sort of like a superhero type character. So it was a real shift for me to get my head around. So like, oh, we got one book following these planeswalkers. I'm like, but they're so powerful. And like, no, actually they're not. I'm like, oh, okay, sure.
Well, Magic players are known to be extremely passionate about the game. Is there a pretty passionate following for the book? Is there a good community around it?
Yeah, there are some for sure. It's they're not. I don't hear about it as much, but I mean the book is selling, so people are reading it. It's just working with Marvel superheroes and stuff. You're used to people chirping off about it all the time, whereas you get a lot less of that with Magic, either because they're focused on the card set, or because it's a license thing. So there's a lot less kind of debate and discussion about it than you would get from something like a Marvel book or a DC book, because that's first and foremost a comic book property.
Right.
That's the main sort of avenue for those stories, whereas Magic is a licensed book, so it's, I'm not going to say secondary, but certainly an alternate sort of story family from the core story family that's in the card games. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I know you've been getting back into the con scene a little bit, as hopefully we're coming out of COVID. Have you had any Magic fans approach you at cons yet to sign Magic books as opposed to the superhero stuff?
That's a good question. So I was at Toronto Comic-Con. I think there must have been some Magic books. I actually get more Magic people come to signings at stores, I find.
Oh, gotcha.
Than the shows, for whatever reason. I think.
I mean, it might just be more their environment, like that's where they go to buy their cards, as opposed to why would they go to a Comic-Con if it.
I think so, because if you're playing Magic and you're not interested in comics, I don't think there's a whole lot at a comic convention for you. Whereas at a store, the store is kind of like the hub of a Magic scene where people will play, there's Friday night Magic. It's where they buy their cards, where they trade their cards, sell their cards, etc. So it just kind of makes sense that's a little more of a hub for Magic players than would necessarily be a comic convention, if they weren't already interested in other comic stuff.
Right. Are you planning long form for Magic? I mean, I like I said, I'm not into it anymore. I don't read it, but I find it fascinating that it has because they've tried it before a few times, and it's never lasted as long as it is this time. So, are you going big? Are you going long form stories? Is it more one and dones? Like, what's the story structure you're going for?
So yeah, we're basically doing 10-issue arcs. I'm kind of regarding it as seasons, for lack of a better term, where from 1 to 10 we deal with a huge threat, and then 11 to 20 we're dealing with an even bigger threat, and just kind of ramping it up each time. So it is, I'll just keep going until they tell me to stop. Like any comic book, it's not going to go on forever, but it's had a pretty good run. Certainly a better one than you would expect for a lot of licensed stuff.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, you mentioned, and we talked about kind of your way in to the industry, which was a little different. Everybody has a different way in, and then they seal up the hole behind you. You haven't done a lot of creator-owned stuff. Didn't necessarily get noticed doing that. Do you have an itch to do that in the future? Is that something that's on your radar?
Yeah, for sure. It's something I always want to do. I just find it kind of tough because I'm kept very busy with my Marvel stuff right now. I'm on an exclusive contract as well. So I have, obligations there. But yeah, like I've definitely have projects that I would like to do. It's just a matter of, finding the time for them, really. And also, finding the paper, because apparently it's very difficult to get indie stuff out now. And nothing's going back for a second run from Image, for instance. So it's not exactly the easiest time in the world to do it.
Yeah, so. No, and I would think that looking at the past, some of the other creators who've been lucky enough to work at Marvel, like yourself, strike while the iron is hot at Marvel. Help build up your profile, build up your name. Hopefully more readers will discover your stuff, so that when you do go to do something creator owned or independent, you've got that bigger following to help get it off the ground.
Yeah, I mean, there's also very much kind of a make hay while the sun shines kind of mentality where, my work with Marvel, I do it and I get paid almost immediately, and then I don't have to worry about where the paper's coming from or like when it's going to get printed, you know? So while that work is there, then, I do that work, but I am very aware that, I want to build something that I have more ownership over, build something I have more equity or stake in. Um, so hopefully in the future, I can start working on something like that, because there's other stories I want to tell outside of superhero stuff. So we'll, we'll just see when that shakes out.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll certainly have you back on to help spread the word when the time is right.
Oh, I'm pretty sure every podcast has ever been on will get an email from me saying, "Hey, I want to talk about this book."
Yeah, Miser, I scratch your back now. You scratch mine. 100%.
So you guys owe me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's been great chatting with you, Jed. You're doing gangbusters, man. Congratulations on all the success. As we're winding down here, is there anything you want to share with our listeners?
Not much. Just, we've got some books coming out. Moon Knight is ongoing. Strange is ongoing. Magic is ongoing. The schedule is being shifted around a little bit in May, but the books are still coming out. And in June, I believe, we have Iron Cat starting up, which is going to be a lot of fun. Getting to get back into the Black Cat litter box and see what we can dig up.
Fantastic. If somebody wants to follow along your work online, are you active on social media? Is there a best place they can follow you?
Yeah, like my basically sole public facing social media is my Twitter. So it's just at Jed Mackay, JedMackay, not MCKAY, which seems to be perhaps more common than the actual spelling of my name. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I usually just kind of talk about comics that tickle my fancy and do a lot of shameless self-promotion.
Fantastic. I'll put a link to Jed's social media in the show notes, everybody. So if you're having trouble finding them or can't remember how to spell it, just go click there and you'll find it. So again, Jed, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate the time.
Happy to be on.
Yeah, best of luck in the future. And to all you listeners, we want to thank you for joining us. We appreciate the support as always, and we'll talk to you next time.